So I packed up and left Korea. Returning home was bittersweet. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it also felt like the right move. Staying wouldn't have given me anything more. It was comforting to be back in America. Everything was familiar, more gregarious, more relaxed. There was this internal relief seeing everything in English. It was so freeing to be able to communicate without barriers. There was comfort here, like cuddling by the fire with a warm cup of cocoa in a snowstorm. I had also returned home in time to see my grandfather before he passed away. He was still able to walk and sit up, but he quickly deteriorated. His death was not a surprise as he had been sick for a very long time. Some of my friends said he waited for me to return so the family would be whole before he went. Maybe. That I won't know for sure, but I do know I was glad I could say goodbye. Death and grief isn't a new theme in my life, but witnessing and experiencing it as an adult gave it new meaning. I became an anthropologist, observing my family from a distance. I saw tears and sadness, but I was most struck with how stoic and pragmatic everyone was, and how quickly everyone moved on. The family immediately jumped into action to handle the logistics for the funeral, what needed to be prepared, throwing and clearing away his clothes and belongings without shedding a single tear or becoming emotional at all. Before my grandfather left, he fought so hard to stay alive. During his last few days, he was angry, grumpy, demanding, and just exhausting himself. But why? I wasn't sure why he wanted to cling to a life where he wasn't able to walk more than a few steps, where he was in pain every moment. There was no sense in honoring his life with a eulogy or remembrance. Who was this man that I called grandfather? What was he like? What memories did people have of him? What did his death mean to them? There were no stories told or remembered, no fondness of memories for him. After the funeral, everyone moved quickly to continue their life as usual. It seemed that death was just a part of life, and the grief was brief. There was one person that missed him the most, Grandma, his wife. Grandma was alone in her apartment. She had never been alone for the majority of her years alive. Grandpa was her steady companion, and ever since she had met him, she clung. He also did everything from shopping, cooking, and cleaning until he couldn't. Everyone doubted Grandma's ability to cope, thinking she would be hysterical and fall apart. And she did, on the day it happened. But afterwards, she mostly fell into a silence and a sadness that consumed her. I have a decent relationship with my family, but I would not characterize us as close. There are a lot of strains and a big communication barrier. These strains stem from societal and cultural differences that are common among second-generation immigrants. I have never felt understood or seen by my family, always feeling like they saw me as a pawn to make their immigrant dreams come true. Something they could brag about if I met milestones and accomplishments, but who I was, what I was going through, my emotions, feelings, and dreams weren't particularly important to them. And I'm sure they grew up in a time when dreams, emotions, and feelings were a foreign and distant concept.
It is Sunday. It is the last weekend of February. It's been a while, so I've been back in the US for 3 months. A lot has happened, and I'm so tired. But a new place. Actually, I'm at my grandma's place. I'm staying with her for maybe indefinitely, but definitely help her out, because since coming back, my grandfather passed away, but he's been sick for a while. Funeral, dealing with different living arrangements, applying for jobs. I finally finished editing my Soul series. I want to go back, but who knows when.
Being a caretaker for Grandma was an additional burden and responsibility that I did not want to accept. Not only that, they wanted me to watch over her, but not do anything. And they didn't do anything when I was trying to sound the alarm that she was depressed, wasn't eating well, And their response was, well, that's to be expected. Well, there's nothing that can be done. Then one Saturday morning, I found Grandma, unresponsive, foaming at the mouth. Her blood sugar was so low from her poor appetite that she needed to be rushed to the hospital. It was a frightening moment and frustrating that nobody listened when I saw a need for intervention. Living with her also flooded my mind with memories of what a horrible woman she could be. The image of a sweet grandma showering you with affection and cooking delicious foods for you was not who she was. She was bossy and a bully, and she took her frustrations out on the women in the family, especially my aunt and my mother. She doted on the guys in the family, but wanted to degrade the women. I still can't find a moment in my past where I felt loved and cared for as a child by her. For me, finding her unresponsive gave me a bit of trauma. I would get anxious, wondering if she was sleeping or perhaps she had passed away. I got anxious at thoughts of discovering her unresponsive or worse, dead. I was so stressed. I was working 2 jobs and having to do schoolwork. I barely had time for myself to rest. Mentally, I was in a bad place. I felt stuck and trapped. You see, because I had just returned from Korea, I had the most flexibility. My life in Boston had not grown roots yet, so I was sacrificed to watch over and stay at Grandma's so she wouldn't be alone. In one of those moments of anxiety and going through the thoughts of, oh my God, is she alive? Is she dead? Should I check? Let me go check on her breathing. I stopped. And then I asked myself, so what happened if she did pass away? Could I control that? Being trained as a medical professional, I could objectively see that there was nothing about her condition that would qualify her for needed skilled care. My family had a narrative that she was helpless and weak, but the professionals were saying she was completely fine, better than other people her age. I finally began to discern and see with my own eyes that this narrative was false and imprisoned me to feel like I needed to be stuck, monitoring Grandma every second, every hour. I hit a really low point in my life during this time. I couldn't focus on my schoolwork. I was spacing out. I felt like crying whenever I got a chance to myself, even if that chance was by myself in a crowded public library. For the first time in my life, I contemplated if I needed some medications to help with my mental health. I knew that whatever funk I was in was temporary. The situation was also temporary, but I just wanted some help to get to the light at the end of the tunnel. In that moment of meditative reflection, I realized the lessons I had learned in the past years. I could not control life. I realized me being physically there with Grandma day in and day out did not mean I could control whether she's lived or passed away. There was no way I could monitor Grandma every second, every moment. I decided in that moment that I would relinquish the belief that I could control outcomes and that she was not as helpless as everyone made her to be. In that moment, I decided I needed to live. I began to break away from being at the apartment all the time. I spent my weekends at the library where I could study and do schoolwork in peace. I quit my part-time job at Starbucks when it stopped being fun. I told my mother how being in Boston made me severely unhappy so that she could know what I was going through even if nothing came out of it, which, by the way, nothing did. She ignored it. But this way, I let her know that she wouldn't be surprised if I leave Boston. I had conversations stating that I would not be living with Grandma for the rest of her life. She was not my responsibility and that I had my own life to live. I began to draw my own lines for what works and does not work for me. My yoga teacher once said that Eden is a 4-walled garden. Boundaries keep you feeling safe and secure. And you, as your ultimate advocate, have to draw those boundaries even if they conflict with the desires of those closest to you. Love is respect, and those who love you will respect them. The more I advocated for myself, the more I gained respect for my family. It was pretty scary at first, but I came to a point in my own self-development that I couldn't be passive in my own life, that I couldn't ignore my own will and desires. It was clear to me that nobody was looking out for me with my best interests except me. The more I drew the lines, the more I took control of the things I could control, the better I felt. And slowly but steadily, the light at the end of the tunnel became brighter and clearer.